Oliver declaring that he couldn't die just yet, and that their fallen comrades would scream from their graves, the ones who had died because of Oliver. Oliver called his name, but before he could continue speaking, Chiral stabbed him. Surprising Oliver with his dying breath, he called Chiral his comrade and asked how it had come to this. Then Oliver collapsed lifelessly to the ground. Chiral addressed the dead Oliver, questioning how he could claim they were comrades, accusing him of maintaining a pretentious act. RMC Chiral MacGyver was a man who had led countless wars to victory, bearing the title of Sword Saint and serving as the guardian of the Empire, but now, on this day, Chiral MacGyver had become a traitor who had slain the Emperor. The soldiers discovered him, branding him a traitor, and charged towards him to end his life. Someone behind him stated that he had become a traitor to the Empire. This person was Nard Dimog, the Platinum Dragon. For 10 years during the Divine War, humanity fought against the dreadful corruption. The 10 of them, including Chiral, risked their lives fighting for the Emperor. However, upon returning to their homeland after the horrific war, they were not greeted with warmth, but with death. All of Chiral's comrades had been brutally killed by the Emperor's hand. Chiral believed that if he could change everything, he would even go to hell. Nardi asked him what he would do now with his comrades and the Emperor dead. He questioned whether Chiral would face his own demise just like that. Nardi also pointed out that history would remember Chiral as a traitor who eventually betrayed the Emperor, someone who accepted dirty immigrants from the north, but the truth would remain hidden. It was the Emperor who had tried to assassinate the great sword Saint Chiral MacGyver, betrayed by the person he had risked his life to protect. Chiral furiously demanded answers from Oliver, the Emperor. He reminded Nardi that he had asked him earlier what he would do, and Chiral's response was that he would return to the past to achieve this. He was heading to the tower. Feral Nardi sincerely asked Chiral if he was truly planning to go back to the past. Chiral arrived at Feral, a place shrouded in death, but also offering a second chance. Nardi acknowledged that even he, a dragon, couldn't predict what lay inside, and that Chiral might have to face creatures more fearsome than the monsters of the divine trust. Even as a sword Saint, Chiral couldn't guarantee that he would reach the end. However, one thing was certain: if Chiral reached the top of Feral, he could return to the past. Nard I asked Chiral if he was truly committed to taking that path. Chiral reached the light at the top of Feral and slowly entered it, responding with a resolute yes to Nardi's question, as it was the only path left for him. Now he declared that he would rectify his twisted fate with his own hands and survive. After surviving, he would undoubtedly return to the past, cutting down everything in his way, overcoming challenges and continuing to do so. He vowed to crawl up that hellish tower, even if his body crumbled, and even if it took an eternity to turn the tables. He promised that he would unquestionably return back to before it all began, to the point where he could change the future. His past self welcomed him, and then he noticed shining clocks. Suddenly someone called his name, awakening him. He looked around, wondering where he was, and glanced at his hands. When someone asked if he was nervous, the man reassured him, and he was surprised to see his father's face, as he had been certain he was in Feral. He looked out of the carriage window and was astonished to realize that he was experiencing the moments he had longed to see again, and the landscapes he had missed dearly beyond the constraints of time's hellish grip. He was relieved that he had finally returned, presumably to the time when he had been adopted as a child by his father, Cruel. He was ecstatic that he had safely returned before the Divine War commenced. Cruel acknowledged that leaving his homeland must have been nerve-wracking, and offered to help him settle into their home. He asked Chiral if there was anything he wanted to do. Kai pondered what it was he wanted to do, and then realized that it wasn't just a desire, but an obligation for his fallen brothers and followers who had died unjustly, and for the fate that had been betrayed. Knowing that he possessed the power to change the future, he told his father that he wanted to learn magic. Cruel was confused, stating that as an immigrant he knew Chiral couldn't use magic. Chiral replied affirmatively, explaining that was precisely why he needed it more. He believed that swordsmanship alone would not be enough. With a bloody war on the verge of erupting, he had to ascend to the pinnacle of power not only with his sword but also with magic. He vowed not to repeat the failures of his past life. Clenching his fist, he declared that the god of Eula should watch him closely. Confidently, he believed that he would unquestionably change the future crew. Will asked Chiral if he knew that immigrants were born without magic. Cruel MacGyver, a commander of the empires, Blue Knights and one of the only 5 swordmasters on the continent, told Chiral that he must want to take revenge on him. Under the Emperor's Edict of Heresy, he revealed that he was the one who killed Chiral's triumph, and his father Crew will explain that he had taken Chiral, and because he recognized him as a great warrior, a child of Kaliak. Loosening his necktie, Cruel told Cairo that perhaps his anger towards him would make him stronger, and he challenged Chiral to prove it to him. He reminded Chiral that he was the one who had taken him in the Magiver family, and that Chiral should show him the talent he inherited from his father. They arrived at MacGyver Palace, and Crew will instructed Chiral to follow him. They were met by 5 men, and Crew will explain that they would be Chiral's new brothers. He introduced Markiver as the eldest and only biological son among MacGyver's children who had died miserably during the Divine War in the past. Chiral shook Mart's hand, introducing himself as Chiral as Cruel walked upstairs. He mentioned that Chiral must be tired from the journey and offered to show him to his room. They remained silent for a moment, and the other 2 men introduced themselves as Elliot and Jake. Seeing their faces reminded Chiral of the time when they had also died to the Divine. Clenching his hand, he made a firm resolution that he would change their fates and prevent their deaths. With determination, he walked upstairs to alter the future that had been foretold. Later, the siblings trained together. While discussing what the new guy Chiral was doing, one of them remarked that Chiral seemed to be exploring the mansion and asked the others for their thoughts. Tyron overheard them mentioning that he was an immigrant while Elliot was training with Mart. He expressed his concerns about Chiral, questioning whether bringing an immigrant into the family was too much, and if it defied the Emperor's command to kill the enemy. Mark told Elliot that he was overthinking things, and they resumed their training. During the training, Mart surprised Elliot by launching a sudden attack and managing to disarm him. Pointing his sword near Elliot's neck, Mart told him that they were all in the same boat and reminded him that Chiral was their youngest brother. Elliot realized that Mart truly considered them brothers, even accepting immigrants, and believed that Mart was the true heir of their family. Their other brothers expressed their reservations about Chiral being an immigrant, but Mart replied that they would have to see if saving Chiral was more valuable than obeying the Emperor's edict. One of the brothers speculated that their father would not include Chiral in the succession. Mart handed his sword to Elliot, dismissing the idea and telling him to stop thinking and start training. Just then Chiral arrived, and Mart was surprised to see him glaring at him. He wondered if Chiral was trying to provoke him. Mart asked Chiral if he knew how to use a sword, mentioning the rumors he had heard about immigrants from the north tearing people apart with their hands. Wart challenged Chiral to give it a try instead of just watching, and Chiral responded that he would be glad to and would be happy to respond if Mart was serious. Elliot thought that Chiral was a crazy bastard and wondered why he was provoking their older brother. The other brother was also angry and questioned if Chiral had come there just to cause trouble. Mart was momentarily speechless, but then angrily threw a sword toward Chiral. Chiral caught it and agreed to the challenge. Mart pointed his sword at Chiral, stating that whether he liked it or not, Chiral would have to live there, and as his elder brother Mark would teach him the laws of the Empire. Chiral realized that it was the Mana Blade and smiled, realizing that Mart had fallen for such a petty provocation. The plan he had formulated while climbing Pharaoh for an eternity in the first step you'll take to change the future is Mart McKiver. Mart furiously attacked him, but he swiftly blocked the attack with his sword, causing them both to retreat. He couldn't help but be impressed by Mart's skills as an heir to the prestigious Mangiver House. Mart's abilities were unquestionable, however. He remained confident that Mart's lack of real Combat experience would be his downfall. He had no choice, but to make Mart understand this, he warned Mark that if he didn't make the first move, he would. Wart's anger flared, and he charged toward him, hurling insults at him. Mart swung his sword, but once again he skillfully parried the attack. Upon closer inspection, he noticed weaknesses in Mart's technique. Despite his initial speed and sharpness, retreating his sword, he launched a punch toward Mart, catching him off guard. The blow landed squarely on Mart's face, causing him to drop his sword. He knew that ultimately Mart's lack of combat experience couldn't be overcome. Mart fell to the ground in pain, and Elliot, worried for his brother, attempted to attack him. However, Mart stopped Elliot and instructed him to stay put, extending his hand to help Mart. He acknowledged that Mart was intelligent and must have realized his shortcomings. Mart, however, swatted his hand away, claiming that he had learned a lot. He understood that Mart was someone he needed. Suddenly, a noise interrupted their training session. Mart immediately turned around upon recognizing the voice. It was Cruel, who declared that training was over for the day, instructing everyone to return to their rooms. They all acknowledged his order and began to disperse. As he made his way to leave, Crew all called his name, advising him not to visit the training ground for the time being. He smiled in response, stating that he would do as he pleased. The scene shifts to another man commented to Cruel that he seemed to have brought a troublesome individual. Cruel explained that it was precisely why he had separated him from the other children, and he believed that Chiral would adjust eventually. He revealed that Chiral was the child of Kali, the chieftain of the Black Eye tribe, emphasizing that a lion doesn't give birth to a kitten. Curious, Cruel asked the man for his opinion of Chiral. The man responded, praising Chiral is a true child of the Black Eye tribe, known for their exceptional swordsmanship. He possessed a sturdy skeleton, flexibility, and even the distinctive rhythm of the tribal warriors. The man believed that if anyone were born for the sword, it would be Chiral. Cruel mentioned that if Chiral were an imperial, he would likely have claimed the title of youngest swordmaster. Meanwhile, in his room, he knew that Cruella would be leaving for the imperial palace in a week. Glancing at his reflection in the window mirror, he realized it was his only opportunity. He remembered Narda's words expressing surprise at how a mere human like him could handle a sword so well. Nardi had believed that he might even surpass his father soon. Regrettably, if only he had known earlier that he was a member of the Magaver house, he could have acquired magical powers with Narda's help. Grateful to Nardi for opening up a path he couldn't access before, he was determined to make the Handgup's fate that Nardi had taught him his own. The following day, Lady Isabel Escher, Cruel's wife, confronted him, angrily questioning whether it was true that an immigrant child without any magical bloodline wished to learn magic. She worried that Chiral might have ulterior motives, suspecting that he knew her family had a long lineage of mages. He assured her that this was not the case, reminding her of the past when he was aided by Kali. He emphasized that Chiral was the son of his friend Kali, and if Chiral desired to learn, the least they could do was not hinder him. He viewed it as a courtesy to Kali, even though he understood it was an impossible task. Later, they gathered around the long table for a meal. Lady Isabel addressed him directly, confirming that he was Chiral, and expressed surprise that he wished to learn magic as reported by the Count. This revelation startled Elliot, and Mart. Elliot questioned whether it was even possible for an immigrant to learn magic. While Mart scoffed at the idea, believing Chiral had lost his mind, Cairo retorted that it wasn't about learning but understanding magic. Lady Isabel inquired about Chiral's motives, and he understood that he needed to make his presence known and prove his worth to his father. He realized that what mattered to him now was earning his father's recognition, even though it was something they would never openly discuss. The answer his father truly sought, he boldly proclaimed his desire to surpass everyone at the table, causing them all to be taken aback. Mart, fuming with anger, questioned what he had just said. The group turned their attention to their father, awaiting his response. Cruel told him that it was quite the response, and asked him if does that everyone include him, to which he nodded in agreement. Mart stand up furiously, calling him Insolent but cruel shouted that it was enough. Crew will acknowledge Kairo's desire to surpass him not only in magic, but also in swordsmanship. He questioned whether Kairo understood the implications of his words, to which Kairo responded with a firm affirmation. Cruel smiled proudly, remarking that Kairo's audacity aligned perfectly with the spirit of the Magiver House. He informed Kairo that the Magiver House possessed the library called Inary housing books on magic. He encouraged Kairo to feel free to read them, much to Lady Isabel's dismay. However, Kairo thanked his stepfather, appreciative of the opportunity. Later, inside Inary, he read the books and realized that there was little of value to be found. He questioned whether Cruel truly believed that he could master magic merely by reading these books. He pondered whether Cruel was playing a prank on him, but he recognized that a prank wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. Although he had treated Honorary lightly in the past, he knew that within its walls lay the key to his reincarnation. The heart of the dragon, possessing it would grant him access to magic, a power he sought. Then he suddenly remembered that he had asked Nardi how to obtain the power of reincarnation. Nardi had replied that he needed to consume the heart of a dragon. Pointing at Nardi, he asked if he meant his own heart, which caught Nard by surprise. Nard I questioned whether he thought he was crazy enough to give away his own heart. He explained that Terrain Karn, it had to be done before the age of 15, and for someone as old as him, trying to become a hero would be pointless. However, he mentioned that if he could go back in time, things might be different. Fortunately, he had been adopted into the Magiva family, where a hidden dragon's heart was rumored to lie. He shared the information that the only place to find a dragon's heart was in Inary. Determined, he clenched his hand and promised Nardi that he would make good use of it. A week later, Cruel asked a man if Kairo was still spending time in the mansion's backyard. The man replied that it seemed like Kairo was training, but not in swordsmanship. He mentioned that it had already been a week, and he thought Kairo would be buried in the library, which struck him as strange. The man added that they were running very late, and the knights were waiting at the routine fortress. He warned Cruel that if they delayed any longer, even the emperor would be angry. Cruel reluctantly acknowledged this and ordered the man to bring him to the fortress. Meanwhile, at night, Kairo engaged in imaginary battles against imaginary foes. He conjured a shadow person and dodged its attacks, but he couldn't move any faster. He wondered if it was because he was still a child. The shadow sword struck his chest, and he realized he still couldn't replicate the movements from the tower. He noticed that the environment in this place was different from the tower. Nevertheless, he knew he needed to recreate it and regain the sensation to reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship. However, he also understood that there was no need to rush, because the experience he gained in the tower wouldn't disappear, and building his body was more urgent. Suddenly, someone called out to him, reporting that the butler was there. The man informed him that the master had called for him. Kairo clenched his hand, relieved that Cruel had finally called him. A few minutes later, he arrived at Cruel's office. Pyro mentioned that he heard he was called, and Cruel asked him to sit down. Cruel inquired about the peculiar training Kairo had been doing. Kairo replied that he was simply working on building his body. Cruel then informed him that the next day they would be leaving for the Imperial Palace, and Kairo would have to leave the mansion for a while. He handed a sword to Kairo, explaining that it was a relic his father had left for him. Cruel remarked that he thought Kairo would have spent more time in the library by now, and asked if he wasn't curious. Kairo replied that he just didn't think the time was right yet, but the truth is that he had been waiting for Cruel to leave the mansion before exploring the library. The next day, Elliot called Kairo an unlucky fool and wondered if Kairo believed he had become something special. One of his brothers cautioned Elliot to be careful with his words, since is also a noble. Elliot argued that he had witnessed what the master did to Kairo, and after Cruel left the palace, Kairo locked himself in the library. Mart understood Elliot's dissatisfaction, but advised him to keep it moderate. Bart knew that their other brothers were accustomed to fighting, so they might share Elliot's sentiments. He wondered if the bookworm Tyron felt the same. Mart turned to Tyron and asked for his opinion. Tyron replied by questioning whether Chiral knew that Mono was the condensed energy of the body and the external world. Tyron explained that one needed mana within their body to gather it, but Chiral and other immigrants didn't possess what was called mana blood. He clarified that it wasn't a matter of whether they could learn magic or not. Tyron believed that it was impossible for someone who couldn't even sense mana to understand the structure of magic, but he predicted that Cairo would give up in a few days. Meanwhile, in Inary, Cairo recalled that the mansion belonged to the Magivers, but was not built by them. Both the mansion and the library had been constructed by the Escher family. Kaeshir, the great magician who had laid the foundation of the empire 250 years ago and was the first dragon hunter, had hidden the heart of a dragon in Inary. However, nobody had been able to uncover the secret of Inary, or rather nobody had been able to understand Kaeshir's twisted personality. Chiral realized that Kai had created a barrier with an absurd condition. The more he investigated, the more amazing it became. He noticed that all the books that were related to the Edict of Heresy from 250 years ago. He reached out and pulled one of the books, and suddenly the bookshelf shifted, revealing a hidden door. He had found it. Standing before the door, he knew that Kai had designed it so that only those without mana could find it, and he had made it undetectable by the citizens right in the middle of the empire, so it could survive all that time. With anticipation, he twisted the doorknob, acknowledging Kai as an incredible human who had been recognized by the dragons. It was said that your great magician, if you had managed to open 8 out of the 12 mana points in body, but Kai opened 9. Even so, Kai can't compare to a dragon, and no matter how amazing he is, a human can only have one attribute. Then he saw a small chest inside, knowing that the heart of a dragon contains all attributes. If by some chance a human consumes it before turning 15, and if they can absorb the power within the dragon's heart. Tyrol made a bold decision and placed the dragon's heart in his mouth and swallowed it, fully aware that the act itself was a gamble, and surviving after consuming a dragon's heart would be nothing short of a miracle. The pain surged through his body, and he found himself coughing up blood. Realizing the magnitude of the risk he had taken in that moment, he understood that it would be best to abandon any what-if thoughts. The power contained within the dragon's heart was simply not meant for humans to handle. He slowly faded as he entered an unfamiliar place. Looking around in wonder, he strained to hear voices, but they were muffled and unclear. Turning back, he heard someone say, "At last we meet," and addressed him as Lyceria. He saw Kai standing behind him. The dragon called Kaya Despicable One, and he realized that it wasn't his voice, but rather the residual memory of dragon Lyceria in his heart. Lyceria asked Kai why he hunted dragons when they were of the same kind. Kai replied that she talked too much and asked if she could see her end. Furious, Lyceria told him to shut up and attacked him with fire. He was astonished by Lyceria's immense power as the fire engulfed Kai, but Lyceria continued to burn him in anger. Realizing that they wouldn't survive such a powerful fire breath, he wondered how Kai managed to slay the dragon. Then he noticed Kai still standing unscathed, holding a swarm of arrows in the air. Kai said ignite, and his arrow burst into flames. The fiery arrows flew towards Lyceria. Surprising her, she wondered why Kai was using a first-class magic spell against a dragon. The arrows hit Lyceria, causing the dragon to roar loudly in pain. He felt the same pain as well. Realizing that Lyceria's agony was directly transmitted to him, he pondered if this was what it meant to face death, but reminded himself that he was the one who had survived the Tower of Trials. He resolved to endure and overcome the attacks that had killed the dragon, knowing he would absorb its heart. Lyceria told Kai that she saw the logic no longer applied, accusing him of pouring 5th-class magic into a 1st-class spell. She then asked him if her death would bring him a fresh start. Kai confidently replied of course, but added that his magic would end with him. With that, he burned Lyceria to death, understanding that both her essence and his were right there. Later, he opened his eyes and let out a painful groan. The server anxiously asked if he was conscious and if he knew who he was. The Server said they would inform the lady immediately. He glanced at his hand, feeling the power coursing through him. However, he stopped the server from informing the lady, requesting some time alone. The server looked back in confusion and tried to protest, but he insisted that he would inform her himself when he was feeling better. Eventually, the server complied and left. He observed a mark on his hand and realized that it represented unimaginable power, magical power. He knew his plan was about to unfold later. The server advised him to rest more, mentioning that if Jake hadn't found him, it would have been a disaster. He knew that Jake was his fifth brother and not particularly interested in martial arts, so his fascination with the library was not surprising. Expressing gratitude, he asked the server how many days he had been unconscious. The server replied a week. Surprising him, he inquired if anyone had come to see him, and the server confirmed that someone from the palace had visited, though unsure of the reason. He recalled that the royal family usually sent an edict to MacGyver once a quarter, unless there was a special circumstance. He realized that something important must have happened during his time of rest, causing him to miss it. He assured the server that he understood and instructed him to leave. He believed it was best to keep his recovery a secret for now and avoid attracting his brother's attention. He then considered the magic power that had settled in his body and pondered how to wield it. Activating it, he commanded it to move, and his magic power complied, confirming that he had indeed gained magical abilities. Amazed, he looked at his hand, realizing that the immense magic power he possessed couldn't be compared to that of an ordinary magician. The power of a dragon was truly incredible. However, suddenly he felt a searing pain and coughed, slowly collapsing to the floor. He desperately tried to halt his descent, but failed. Recognizing that his mana veins had stopped opening, with determination he shakily stood up. Knowing that out of 12 veins only 2 had opened, he realized he needed to open 10 more. Standing firm, as if he hadn't just experienced pain, he told Eula to wait for him, because his journey was beginning now. He took a deep breath to calm himself down, realizing that the overwhelming magic power within him was on the verge of overflowing. He understood that his body's blood veins were unable to handle it, and if he couldn't control the surging magic, it would eventually lead to a catastrophic explosion. Realizing he needed a weapon capable of containing that immense power, he looked at the sword given to him by Cruel. He knew that it was an impossible task for a human, as the blood veins alone couldn't handle it, but he reached for the sword named Agnel, his real father's legacy. Pulling it out from its shelf, he activated his magic towards it, knowing it was a weapon of the immigrants capable of withstanding such magic. A smile formed on his face as he proudly believed that these conditions were enough to lay the groundwork later. Within the forest, he gathered his magic power and swung the sword at the trees in front of him, effortlessly breaking them in half. Looking at his sword, he understood that it wasn't on par with the mana blades of the Imperials. Instead, it held the pure magic of a dragon, devoid of any attributes. Honora blade in the past, those who could infuse use fourth-class magic into a mana blade and reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship were called sword masters. Those who reached the pinnacle of the sword called him a sword saint. Even after he couldn't use the mana blade, he wondered how they would react if they saw him now. Suddenly he coughed and felt a sharp pain coursing through his body. He knelt to the ground, realizing that even by briefly using magic, the pain was excruciating. It became evident to him that he couldn't freely wield his magic with just 2 blood veins opened. He knew he needed to find a way to stabilize his blood veins. Determined, he stood up, understanding that until he opened 10 more blood veins, he would remain a half-baked existence. Despite his unease, there was nothing particularly noticeable. No matter how much he searched Inary, he knew Kai had hidden something there, preventing anyone from finding it. The fact that the dragon's heart had been concealed there implied the presence of something else hidden within Inary. All he could do was continue searching through Inary. Suddenly, a server called out to him in a panic, and he smiled, knowing that it seemed the incident was about to unfold. What needed to happen always happened. Later, all the siblings faced their mother Isabel as Martin informed her that everyone had gathered Tyron, and Elliot glared at him furiously, wondering why the immigrant who had never shown his face before was also present. Tyron considered him shameless, while Elliot thought he had survived against all odds, but he didn't concern himself with their opinions. Isabel unrolled the scroll announcing that she had called them together to deliver an important message. She read aloud that as they were aware the harvest season was approaching, and in line with tradition the royal family had ordered goblin extermination. However, there was a special edition support from the royal family. Isabel explained that in recognition of the Magaver family's use of mercenaries during the heresy extermination decree, the royal family had decided to send support troops. Tyron commented to Mart that it was the first time they were receiving such support, and Mart agreed, acknowledging the assistance would be beneficial during the extermination. However, Elliot voiced his doubts to his mother, stating that something felt strange. He questioned if it wasn't the royal family who called for mercenaries due to the shortage of soldiers for the immigrant extermination. He glanced back at him, suggesting that they should be increasing their troops for the immigrant extermination instead of focusing on monsters. Elliot's directness didn't go unnoticed. Isabel tried to reassure them, saying that the support troops are coming from the Balsar family, making Tyron surprise. After much deliberation, their mother finally informed them that they shouldn't overthink it, but he knew it was a calculated attack specifically targeting the Magaver family, and in 5 days Randall McGiver would meet his demise. The battle was set to take place in 5 days, high above the forest, down a narrow path with no possibility of retreat. His brothers fell into an ambush laid by those lying in wait. The ambush had been meticulously planned, taking advantage of their annual monster extermination. Randall lost his life then and there, but he was confident that he could now defend against such an attack. However, the issue went beyond preventing the ambush. He needed to uncover the mastermind behind it. He couldn't find the perpetrator behind an incident in his past life, but this time around he promised that he'll definitely uncover and punish them. The siblings gathered to discuss the situation. Tyron voiced his suspicion, feeling that something was off about the support they were receiving and the timing of it. He mentioned that it was particularly strange that the support troops were coming from Balsar, a faction that viewed their family as enemies. The fact that Balsar was providing royal support, which had never happened before, raised even more suspicion. Tyron was certain that he wasn't the only one suspecting them, and believed that Balsar might be up to something. Kyril, who was listening, understood that Tyron's suspicions were valid. He knew that it was happening because the Emperor Titan Dane had not yet named the successor. The Emperor had 3 sons, Ruan, Oliver, and Croman. The frail third Prince Croman was not actively involved in the struggle for the throne, leaving the fight primarily between the first Prince Ruan and the second Prince Oliver. The balance of power shifted when their father Cruel, who was the commander of the Blue Knights, supported Oliver instead of Ruan. This naturally led to tensions with Balsar, who supported Ruan. The first Prince Tyron explained that Balsar represented the first prince's faction, and they were now sending support troops from the border. He pointed out that the timing was suspicious, especially when their father was not around. Mart agreed that Tyron had a point, but he assured them that the knights led by their father would return to the north for the extermination, and Balsar wouldn't dare challenge the Blue Knights if they were in their right minds. Tyr frowned in anger at the response. Mart added that above all it was an edict from the royal family, so they should refrain from having disrespectful conversations. However, in his mind, Cairo acknowledged the burdensome situation Tyron must be facing at his age. He silently encouraged Iron to keep doubting, as his suspicion would make him a better strategist. Cairo wanted Tyron to develop into a brilliant strategist who could assist him. Tyron declared that they should proceed as planned and stated that he would participate in the extermination. This surprised Martin. Tyron told Mark that they didn't need to handle it personally. Kyril, who was taken aback by Tyron's decision realized that things were indeed changing. Elliot and Randall offered to accompany Tyron, but he told them that if he needed an escort, he would take Randall and Kyril with him. This shocked Kyril, and the two brothers were both angry and speechless. However, they agreed, and Kyril advised them to start preparing as well before leaving the room, leaving his brothers behind. As he walked, he marveled at Tyron's impressive decision-making skills. He recognized that Tyron had chosen the support troops that would naturally arouse suspicion in this situation. They couldn't send Mart, who was the first in line to succeed. Tyron had played two cards: Randall, who was trustworthy, and himself the expendable one, with little regard for life. He understood that as the newcomer and outcast in the mansion, Tyron wanted to observe him up close and find out the truth for himself. Tyron intended to find the answers on the battlefield, and he thought it was an excellent plan. In his previous life, Tyron hadn't participated in the extermination, so he knew that things were changing. He confidently believed that even the disaster that began with Randall's death and the future itself would change. He swung his sword back and threw it hard toward the forest, then immediately ran to catch it, cutting through the trees in his path. He balanced himself to stop, and the trees he had exploded into pieces in the air. He thought that he had no intention of just watching as events unfolded. With his own hands, he would directly change the future. 5 days later, the Knights of Balsar greeted the members of the Magaver family. The leader of the Knights of Balsar introduced himself as Arden and informed them that in accordance with the royal order, 500 Balsarian troops had arrived to aid the Majava family. Mart thanked Arden, acknowledging the difficulty of defending the border and expressing gratitude on behalf of their father crew. Well, Arden bowed and accepted the gratitude, but privately thought that Mart didn't seem particularly threatening. Arden also knew that the real danger came from the 4 children brought by Eula, who were meant to compensate for Mart's shortcomings. As the eldest, he observed Kyril, who was wearing a mask, wondering who he was. According to the reports, there were only 4 adopted children, so Arden questioned Mart about the masked individual. Mart walked closer to Kyril, explaining that Kyril was the 6th member who had recently joined the family ward, requested that Arden understand Kyril's mask, citing certain circumstances. Arden responded that they now had to refer to them as the 6 lords, not 5. He found the masked man to be quite odd and wondered if Count Cruel had no pride accepting such inexperienced individuals as his adopted children. Afterward, Arden informed the brothers that the Balsar troops would finish preparing for the departure and then walked away. In his mind, he furiously labeled Arden as a filthy spy of the Lorien Empire. Recognizing that they hadn't seen each other for a while, he knows that even if the Balsar family supports the first prince, they wouldn't be so blind as to target their family, and they wouldn't dare to move recklessly, not with the shadow of his father's knight squad. This move signifies that the Balsar family has a certain level of assurance, which means someone outside the Empire is pulling the strings. Bart looks at him and asks what is on his mind. He replies that it is nothing much. Mart tells him that he understands why he is wearing a mask and why they still can't reveal his true identity. He tells him that it doesn't bother him, and he thinks it's actually a blessing in disguise. Also, he believes there is much he can do behind that mask, and above all, it conceals his existence. Arden shouts to his troops to move out, and they begin walking. Mark calls Kyril behind Arden's back and tells him to keep an eye on Arden, to which he nods in agreement, thinking that the sea he longed for his coming later. They are all on horseback. Climbing up the forest, he notices something and realizes that gradually the forest path is getting narrower, which is definitely where they were ambushed before, so he thinks the first thing to do is suddenly someone shouts to them that goblins have been spotted up ahead, and there are more than 100 of them. Arden shouts to everyone to prepare for battle, but he knows that he needs to watch every move they make, leaving no stone unturned, because he won't let things go in Arden's way. This time, the goblins jump toward and attack the troops who are panicking. While trying to block them, Arden jumps toward the goblins and slices them to death. After killing the goblins in front, he tells his troops not to be startled by a petty ambush like this and orders them to maintain formation and switch to the offensive. Then he orders them to attack, to which the troops follow and stab the goblins in front of them. On the other hand, he is riding his horse and swings his sword back, slicing the goblins in his way. He realizes that there aren't enough goblins there, and that number couldn't possibly result in the kind of devastation they faced in the past, Randall dying to a mere pack of goblins. Like this is just impossible. Moreover, the initial shock of the ambush has faded and the situation is leaning in their favor, so he knows that there is definitely something else. Suddenly, he hears people shouting in pain, and when he looks ahead, he sees some troops being thrown in the air and others shouting that a massive attack is coming. The troops inform them that it's coming from behind, causing the brothers to look back and see angry big teeth, a large firm monster's hand, and huge goblins shouting at them in anger. The troops are stunned, and he is surprised to realize that it is the Goblin Chief. The Goblin Chief is not just strong itself, but it usually operates with an army of around 3,000 goblins, making it a significant threat. He now understands how Randall about kill, and at least his first suspicion has somewhat been answered. Tyron shouts for everyone to fall back and not confront the Goblin Chief directly, but Arden turns back, causing Tyron to ask what he is doing. While Kyril wonders about Arden, he rides his horse toward the chief goblin, ordering everyone to maintain formation and retreat. Kyril wonders if Arden really is just a spy from the Empire with no connection to the incident, but he thinks it's ridiculous. Arden's presence there can't be as simple as a coincidence, so he plans to see how long Arden can keep up the act. Arden furiously swings his weapon at the goblins in his way, then he dismounts his horse while ordering his troops to clear the way and not to chase recklessly. The rest of them follow him, leaving the troops shocked. Arden activates his sword, releasing magic power and sharpening it, causing the goblins to shout in pain. He points it toward the chief goblin and throws it, telling it to die, but the chief just swings his weapon, deflecting it away before it hits him. He jumps and catches his spear in the air, then he launches himself to stab the chief goblin. In the process, Kyril notices Arden's hand that holds the spear and is shocked to figure out something. Arden stabs the goblin furiously, but as he expected, Arden has a trick up his sleeve. Just a moment ago, very cunningly, he deliberately grazed it with his attack. Arden pulls his spear out and the goblin furiously attacks him with its weapon, but he blocks it. However, the force of the attack throws him to the ground, causing the troops to worry. The chief goblin turns around, grabs one of the goblins and walks away. Arden orders his troops to go after them and not spare anyone. As he watches Arden, he understands why no one noticed it. With the excuse of chasing the goblin chief, Balsar's soldiers are driven from the battlefield. When only the goblin soldiers are left, they will execute an attack when everyone has let their guard down. He praises Arden for his nice strategy. He has already understood all of Arden's schemes, and after Arden attempted to fool him with his poor acting, suddenly Tyron calls him and suggests that they should leave all the others to Arden and focus on guarding the area. However, he tells Tyron that he's not going after the monsters, but rather after Arden. Later, they are near the top of the forest and Arden stops and looks around. He thinks it will do and tells the soldiers that he will go after the goblin chief, while they split into two groups to take care of the remaining goblins. One of the higher ranking soldiers asks him if he's going alone, and Arden replies that if there is a goblin chief, it means there are also masterminds or sorcerer taking care of everything they need to completely clear out all the remaining goblins. He then asks the man if by any chance he doesn't believe that he can finish them all by himself. The man apologizes and says he didn't mean it that way. Arden leaves, saying that the rest are going to be just a little bothersome for him, thinking that it's okay whether it's a little or a lot. Later, he stops somewhere in the forest and says that it should be easy. Looking at the chief goblin in pain and the other goblins, he dismounts his horse and tells the goblins to come to him, saying that he'll beat them all by Himself, then a man welcomes him and tells him that they have been waiting for him. He tells the man that the little ones from the Magiver family turned out to be good at fighting and asks the man to tell the chief goblin to go away. The man tells the chief goblin and that it can leave. Suddenly someone says, so it was the tangent spot, making Arden look back in shock, asking who it was. Carol tells Arden that he has been fighting too hard and that he should at least try to give them the right context details, as the route was problematic as well. He then says wooden cloud, surprising Arden and causing him to ask how Chiral knew about it. Arden points his spear at him and asks if he is of the same kind or an accomplice. Chiral replies that it's a shame and he really doesn't know him. He tells Arden that he is there to check and confirm because he also hasn't received any reports about him. He doesn't care if Arden believes him or not, but he also has business with the Magiver family. He asks Arden if he's following what he is saying and called Arden's full name. Arden realizes that Chiral knows his full name and wonders if he is really from the cloud. Then he explains that the man is controlling the goblin chief, meaning that he must have spent a lot from the root, and he bets the sorcerer are hiding around that area. But Chiral apologizes and tells that he was being too much and should have been more careful, as clouds should protect their own secrets. He hopes that Arden understand, and since it's a special case, to which Arden nods in agreement. Chiral tells him that he has responsibilities to complete as well, and the branches should just do what they were asked, while the stems are responsible for reporting to the roots. Hearing this, Arden is sure that Chiral is one of them. He tells Chiral that on the opposite side there are goblins hiding and waiting to execute an ambush. When he gives the signal, they will move to the Majira soldiers' location to attack them immediately. Arden also tells him that the charm from the root will help them control the goblins and send signals, and the charm will take care of it all. He walks closer to the man who's holding the charm, saying that it's a relief to hear that the charm will handle all of those tasks by itself. Then unexpectedly he pulls his sword out, but before Arden can stop him, he cut the sorcerer hands in instant and look back at Arden. Arden angrily asks him what the heck he just did. Chiral simply tells him that they now have more time and asks if they should take care of them one by one. Arden asks him where he came from, but Chiral walks closer to him, saying that he has a fantastic opponent there. He is glad that finally, after all that time, he has an opponent with whom he can fully radiate his charm. Barton thought he had never seen a mana blade like it before and wondered what its attributes could be. He also knew that it was an unknown entity with both its attributes and identity shrouded in mystery. He pondered where it had come from and whether it was associated with the Tyros Union or the Istria Confederation. Chiral jumped towards Arden, intending to attack, but Arden blocked the strike using his spear. Arden surprising him with his speed. Arden watched in shock as Chiral leaped towards the chief goblin. The chief goblin shouted, brandishing its weapons to block the attack, but Arden swiftly cut the goblin in half with his monoblade, causing it to fall to the ground in two pieces. Witnessing Chiral take down the chief goblin in a single strike, Arden was shocked and wondered what kind of monster Chiral was in. Where he had come from, Chiral lunged towards him, ready to attack again, but Arden activated his spear with fury, causing Chiral to hesitate. However, Chiral knew he had the upper hand. He effortlessly dodged Arden's magical powers while closing in on him, surprising Arden even more. Arden increased his power to strike, but Chiral managed to evade the blow and in return cut off one of Arden's arms. Initially stunned, Arden eventually knelt on the ground, shouting in pain. Chiral looked at his sword, acknowledging that his swordsmanship could handle that level of power, but he also recognized his shortcomings in explosive magic proficiency. Approaching the injured Arden, Chiral ordered him to answer his questions. He inquired about what art and knew regarding root. Arden retorted, questioning whether someone like him would willingly provide answers. Chiral responded that he didn't expect an answer from him, and that Arden was merely a perfect example. This response left Arden both surprised and confused. Without hesitation, Chiral severed Arden's head. Arden's lifeless body fell to the ground, while Cairo remarked that the sorcerer nearby seemed unaccustomed to pain. The sorcerer without hands was shocked at the sight of Arden's decapitated head and angrily ordered the goblins to attack Chiral. However, the goblins threw down their web weapons and fled. The sorcerer turned back upon hearing Chiral's commanding voice and was told to listen carefully. Chiral informed him that he would only ask once. Later, Chiral descended to where his brothers were with the sorcerer tied up behind him. Tyron dismounted his horse and anxiously called out Chiral's name. Asking what had happened, Tyron also inquired about the fate of the goblin chief and the whereabouts of Lord Arden. Cairo replied that they were ambushed by goblins and sadly Arden had been killed by the goblin chief. He then showed them a bloody object he was holding, leaving Tyre and confused, prompting him to ask what it was. Chiral threw the sorcerer to the ground and explained that it was not a simple ambush but an assault to subjugate the Magiver family. He revealed that the man in front of them was the sorcerer controlling the goblins, and upon verifying his identity they discovered he was from the Lurian Empire. He informed them that with their command structure and chaos the goblins were likely confused. It was crucial for them to make a decision, as leaving the goblins unchecked would cause immense damage to nearby villages. Tyran and Randall were left shocked and speechless. This upon hearing his words, Cairo called upon the lieutenant of the Balsar family, who responded promptly. He informed the lieutenant that their commander was dead and asked if he would assume command. The lieutenant was taken aback and confused. Cairo assured them that if they decided to retreat they wouldn't be blamed, considering both the goblins and Balsars were in chaos after losing their commanders. The lieutenant bowed, realizing that if they retreated the count would not let it go unpunished. He replied that the Balsar family would assist in the subjugation. Mounting his horse again, Chiral expressed his satisfaction and remarked that it was a relief. He then informed Tyron that he was handing over command to him, as the longer the subjugation was delayed the more the civilians would suffer. However, Tyron insisted that Chiral was the one who should lead, as he was the commander. Tyrol nodded in agreement. Acknowledging Tyron's point, he addressed his soldiers, urging them to move forward, knowing they had a mission 3 years ahead and needed to reach a higher position, even if only by a small margin. He understood that if he couldn't attain a position where he could assert his will and dominance, he wouldn't be able to achieve anything. He realized the importance of getting to the capital as soon as possible, as the future was already beginning to change. Later, they encountered the monsters, and Chiral believed that remnants without a commander were nothing. He launched an attack on the goblins, ordering the soldiers to charge at full force, leaving Tyre and wondering how on earth he was supposed to explain this. Tyre knew that Cairo couldn't even use magic, so he wondered how he could fight with such prowess. Randall told him that Cairo was more than they had initially thought and that they were wrong in their assumptions because Chiral was a monster. Randall also mentioned that once Cairo reached adulthood, even the word monster wouldn't be enough to describe him. Meanwhile, in the palace, a man informed Cruel that Cairo had done an excellent job. Cruel replied that he had heard about it and that they had even captured the spy. The man proudly stated that if Chiral hadn't been there, not only the young masters but the territory itself would have been in danger. He mentioned that since the news had reached their majesty, it was likely that the spy would be sent to the imperial palace soon. Cruel remained silent and asked the man if he thought their majesty he would invite Chiral to the palace. Crew all knew that their majesty was already old and wouldn't have any interest in a 12-year-old kid. However, the problem lay with the princes. He understood that they would carefully consider Chiral and didn't know if they would keep him on their side or get rid of him. Even if their majesty was the one to call for Chiral, they wouldn't be able to let him go easily. Meanwhile, in the forest, Chiral knew that now that he had been to the capital of the empire, everything was getting complicated because he was an outsider. However, he was all right with that, as he had come up with another plan. He approached a carriage inside. He called for the sorcerer named Baker and told him to wake up. He instructed Baker to listen carefully from now on and to tell him everything he knew. Cairo assured Baker that it would make things a little easier for him. Baker complied and told him everything. Cairo asked if it was the truth, and Baker replied that he had told him everything he knew, begging him to spare his life. Cairo informed Baker that he would be sent to the capital and tortured there. Shocking Baker, Hyrule explained that the pain of having both arms cut off would be nothing compared to the torture that awaited him. He mentioned that the supervisor of the torture chamber enjoyed cutting people's flesh, and that even if Baker confessed everything, the torture wouldn't stop. Baker would go through hell for several months before meeting a miserable death. Then Cairo handed Baker something and asked if he wished for leniency. Baker recognized of his dwarf ginseng, but Cairo explained that he was giving Baker a chance to die by his own hand, as it was the last thing he could do. The next day they returned to their place, and the people were celebrating their victory, wishing them a long life. Tyran told Cairo to be more confident because he was also the son of Magiver, and it was only natural now that he had made the greatest contribution. Randall told him that he should be at the front line, but Cairo responded that it didn't matter to him, causing Randall to call him cheeky. Cairo looked at his brother, realizing that they had become much softer since they were together. Unlike in the past, he wondered how Randall's survival would affect the future. Tyran mentioned to Randall that he should prepare himself, as now that the incident would be known in the capital, their majesty might summon them. Randall pondered why he was going to the palace when Cairo was the one who had made the greatest contribution to their expedition, but he soon understood that Cairo was an outsider and couldn't go to the palace. He thought that if Cairo couldn't go, then he had no right to go either. Compared to what Cairo had done, his own achievements seemed insignificant. He wondered about the source of Cairo's confidence, knowing that Cairo must understand better than anyone else that being an outsider had its limitations. He questioned how Cairo could be so confident. Randall also pondered over the fact that if Cairo could overcome those limitations, then he should be able to as well. He promised himself that someday he would be like Cairo. Later, he knocked on his father Crewell's door. Crewell welcomed him and praised him for his great job. However, he responded that he was just lucky. Crewell acknowledged that getting lucky was also a skill and mentioned that not only had he caught the spy, but he had also saved his brother's lives. He informed him that the news about him had already spread through the palace, and that about his origin, so he was considering sending Tyrone and Randall in instead. He replied that it was fine with him. Crewell thanked him for his understanding and told him that in exchange he could ask for anything he wanted. He requested a passing permit. Surprising Crewell asked if it meant that he wanted to leave the mansion, and he confirmed it. Crewell inquired if he didn't like living there or if he was disappointed. He clarified that it was not the case and explained that he simply wanted to see a wider world. He understood that gaining freedom was crucial for him to be involved in future events. Crewell informed him that if that was what he wanted, he could have it, and showed him a stamp. He explained that it was a stamp given only to those who carried a mission from him, allowing them to pass all the Empire's checkpoints. However, his identity could not be known. Crewell apologized for not being able to give him credit for his hard work, but he expressed that it should be more than enough for him. Suddenly someone shouted to Crewell, informing him about a big problem. The man told him that the prisoner had killed himself leaving. Crewell, shocked, he asked the man to repeat what he had said. He informed him that the news about him had already spread through the palace and that a message would come from the capital looking for him. Unfortunately, Crewell couldn't inform the Imperial Palace about his origin, so he was considering sending Tyron and Randall in instead. He replied that it was fine with him. Crewell thanked him for his understanding and told him that in exchange he could ask for anything he wanted. He requested a passing permit. Surprising Crewell asked if it meant that he wanted to leave the mansion, and he confirmed it. Cruel inquired if he didn't like living there, or if he was disappointed. He clarified that it was not the case, and explained that he simply wanted to see a wider world. He understood that gaining freedom was crucial for him to be involved in future events. Cruel informed him that if that was what he wanted, he could have it, and showed him a stamp. He explained that it was a stamp given only to those who carried a mission from him, allowing them to pass all the Empire's checkpoints. However, his identity could not be known. Cruel apologized for not being able to give him credit for his hard work, but he expressed that it should be more than enough for him. Suddenly someone shouted to Cruel, informing him about a big problem. The man told him that the prisoner had killed himself leaving. Cruel, shocked, he asked the man to repeat what he had said, but Kyril simply smiled. The man explained that he found dwarf ginseng next to the prisoner's body and had searched the body himself multiple times. He apologized, and Cruel all told him not to be too hard on himself, acknowledging that it was hard to believe he made a mistake. The man informed Cruel that they were in a difficult situation and that representatives from the imperial court would arrive soon. He also reminded Cruel that this was supposed to be his first official duty. Cruel replied that the important part was not that, but rather they would likely be reprimanded for not properly managing the prisoner. Looking at the corpse, Cruel knew that it was a situation where those who deserve recognition were being overlooked, and he found it liberating. He informed the man that regardless, it was highly likely that the first prince's faction would seize the opportunity to attack them. Later, he gazed out of the window, knowing that Prince Ruan wouldn't let this incident slide. He thought of Prince Ruan as a snake who would use the incident to criticize their father, despite their father being one of the 5 sword masters on the continent and a symbol of the empire. To the first prince who craved the throne, their father was merely an obstacle from the opposing faction, ready to strike at any opportunity. Recalling correctly, he knew that their father's expedition would last about a year, and they should be safe from Prince Ruan during that time. He realized it was his chance to find other spies from the Lorien Empire and prepare counter-evidence. He decided that it was time for him to leave that place for real. Later, he entered Inary and searched for other relics that Kaeshir might have hidden. However, he ended up leaving empty-handed, thinking that perhaps Kai had truly left only the heart of the dragon. He felt grateful to Kaeshir because thanks to him he had a new life, and with the power given to him, he would change the world. Suddenly his sword emitted a radiant magical light and flew towards a piece of paper on the ground, leaving him confused. He picked it up, wondering if it was reacting to his magic. Upon opening it, he realized it was the paper that had been inside the box where he found the heart of the dragon. The paper read, "If you fear death, give up your search," making him wonder if it could be the key. Suddenly, the paper floated in the air, surprising him, and then tore into pieces with the words floating in the air. He realized it was reacting to his magic. The words whirled around him, and he marveled at Kai, because it meant that Kai had hidden something more. The letter addressed him as a stranger and welcomed him. Tai wrote that only the one who had seized the power within the heart of the dragon and had mastered the dragon tongue magic could trigger his magic. Kai referred to him as the greedy one who had returned there, and he seemed to appreciate people of his kind. He gripped his sword, realizing it was a doubly hidden treasure and that he had fulfilled such strict conditions. Kai told him that dragon's magic was pure magic, a power that no one else possessed, even something Kai couldn't attain. How he would develop that power was something only he would know, and he should naturally use his magic in the way he was most familiar with. He replied that he had chosen the sword, but Kai told him to remember that the things he was most awkward with would lead him to the ultimate truth, leaving him wondering what Kai meant by that. The magic inside him emerged from his hand, and Kai confirmed that it was magic. Then Kai revealed that he had another gift for him. The shelf opened, revealing a chest full of gold. As Kai explained that he would offer him a little help since he had made it that far, he reached out to grab the snake bracelet, but it suddenly came to life and opened its mouth toward him. Startled, he pulled his hand back, but the snake bracelet merely coiled around his hand without causing harm. Tai informed him that it was the Bracelet of Greed, a bracelet that drained magic. While it would be a cursed item for normal people, it was not the case for him. Someone behind him remarked that he was lucky. Making him turn around, it was Kai, who told him that without the bracelet he would not be able to control the surging magic blood, and he would probably explode and die within a month. Kai congratulated him on receiving his gift before his impending death. He was shocked to hear that, but Kai added that he was the only human who had ever reached the 8th class, but he attained the heart of the dragon, something even Kai couldn't achieve. Kai also told him not to be satisfied with just then, and to surpass him as the one who had survived even after consuming the heart of the dragon. He should ascend greedily and reach the peak that no one else could. Kai emphasized that he should revel in his power, and that he was now more valuable than anyone else. He assured him that he was free. Then Kai asked if he was content being a loyal servant to a king, or if he was satisfied with being a noble who managed a small city. Kai encouraged him not to be under anyone's control, and declared that he, the one who had acquired Kaishir's treasure, should do as he pleased. He laughed awkwardly, wondering if he should take up the trust to become a knight of the Empire once more, alter history, and if he truly wished to even kill his closest friend in the process. He knew he possessed the power of a dragon, but he was still trying to fight while tied to the Empire. He shouted that he didn't need to do it, and that he possessed an immense power. Touching his hair, he realized that he had finally understood, and that he just needed to do what he wanted to make the entire Empire recognize him. He slowly changed his hair color to blonde, his eyes to blue, completely transforming his appearance from an immigrant to an outsider. He decided that in a world divided between outsiders and imperial citizens, he would overturn everything. He also promised Oliver that the day they met again he wouldn't kneel before him, but meet him with an equal gaze. Stepping out of Inary, he told Kai that he was right and that he wouldn't be under anyone's control from now on. Meanwhile, in the Grand Imperial Garden, there was a man who approached Bryn and asked for his opinion on a matter. Bryn Inek, the Prime Minister of the Empire, replied that he believed it was too early to judge because there wasn't enough information. Yet Bryn also spoke to Ruan Stellan, the Crown Prince of the Empire, and expressed his concern about their spy's death. He emphasized that negligent officials should be held accountable. Ruan was surprised by the aggressive move from the Lorien Empire, especially since it occurred in the territory of the Imperial Sword of Cruel. MacGyver Brain explained that the Lorien Empire saw their own empire as a threat and expected such a move. He added that their empire had made many enemies and was considered the loser of the continent, leaving them with no choice but to deal with the situation. Wherein suggested investigating if the incident was related to the southern kingdoms of Astan, Travanel, Penria, or even the 3 kingdoms in the east. Ruan took on the responsibility of handling the situation to divert the conversation. He mentioned hearing that their spy had been caught by a child. Bryn responded that the child in question was Cruel's newest pupil, who was only 12 years old, remarking that it was impressive. Bryn also noted that it was remarkable for Cruel to have taken in such a talented child, but it was unfortunate that the child had different aspirations. He suggested that if they could gain the child's cooperation early on, they could easily make him one of their own. Ruan agreed, mentioning that not all children followed their fathers, will just like them. However, Bryn said something strange about the situation, and Ruan asked what it was. Bryn revealed that the 6th son of the Viscount who caught the spy was not currently at his mansion. He asked Bryn if the palace had taken him in. Before Bryn could respond, someone called out to Ruan, making him angry. It was Oliver Stellan, the 2nd Prince of the Empire, who had come to pay his respects. Reuben expressed his disinterest in such formalities, stating that they had never cared about them before. Oliver informed Ruan that it seemed the palace would be empty for a while, prompting Ruan to ask him what he wanted. Ruan then assured Oliver that he enjoyed wandering around outside, and that he shouldn't worry about whether he was with or without him. He reassured Oliver that the palace had been peaceful so far and would continue to be. Oliver was momentarily speechless before asking if Ruan knew about someone called the Slave King. Ruan explained that the Slave King was a man who helped slaves and immigrants escape a few years ago, and his activities had intensified after the heretic extermination order. He also mentioned that calling the FIFA king was ridiculous. Oliver agreed, but surprised Ruan by stating that the man had recently been caught. Ruan was surprised because the man was never been caught before. Oliver informed Ruan that Vikant Haroon had arrested the man, and he had been lucky. Ruan questioned why he should know such trivial things, to which Oliver replied that he simply wanted to share the news and thought Ruan should know too. Ruan, now angry, asked if Oliver intended to visit the Slave King and told him it was pointless. He insisted that Oliver was wasting his time and if he was done, he should leave. Oliver responded that he would leave. Then he smiled, feeling accomplished. Meanwhile, Cairo was riding his horse somewhere, and he decided to take a quick break. He sat down and drank some water, knowing he was close to the edge of the Manhwa territory. He realized there might be some commotion due to his disappearance, but believed it didn't hold much significance. He understood he had to keep moving forward. His first goal was to gather evidence of Lorien Empire spies within the next 6 months. His second goal was to learn advanced magic. He acknowledged that the magic book and Inary only contained low-level spells, and although he hadn't fully tapped into his magic blood veins, he could still use magic thanks to his bracelet. However, he needed to find a proper place to study advanced magic. He recalled the Ivory Tower of the Dawn Society, closely associated with the royal family, and the Immortal Antiquarian Grand Library, focused solely on magic. However, he knew both places restricted access to their own members. He shook his head, realizing he couldn't do anything about it. Suddenly, a thought struck him, and he realized there was one more place, the lair of his former comrade's Platinum Dragon, Nar Diamog. However, he understood it was too far away, and Nardai was still asleep. Moreover, the guards protecting the lair were too formidable for him. Therefore, his top priority was to improve his skills and build his power. The place he was heading to now would serve as his stepping stone, the free city, the only city on the continent without a king. Eventually, he arrived at the port city of Pesta, where he witnessed a bustling scene of people trading goods in the port. He acknowledged that if it weren't for his success in defeating the goblins earlier, the place might have been destroyed. He overheard a man talking excitedly to his friend, sharing that they had secured a contract to supply the knights who had arrived, relieving their business worries. For a while, the friend asked about the knights' identity. The man replied that they were from the Rhynites. Surprising the friend, the Rhynites were responsible for guarding the eastern border of the empire, and news of the conspiracy in the Lorien Empire had only broken a day ago. Therefore, the friend wondered why the knights were mobilizing so quickly. Kyril knew that the Rhynites remained neutral, but also supported Oliver. He speculated that there might be other plans in motion that he wasn't aware of. Considering investigating further, he said, realizing that he currently had limited options and didn't want to cause trouble without reason, he decided to stick to his own plans. For now, as he looked up, he noticed the Merchant Association building ascending the stairs toward the Merchant Association. He knew that to reach the free city of Tador, he had to pass through the Pawnee River, which ran across the continent. Crossing the rapids and facing the monsters in the river would be challenging. Additionally, only one sailor could take him to Tartar through that river. Inside the building, he approached the lady at the desk and expressed his search for a guild or an upper-class individual who could guide him through the Pawning River to Tartar. He handed her a bag of gold coins. Apologizing to Elliot for using his savings, he understood that creating an upper-class guild was impossible given the imminent war. The lady, however, apologized and pushed the gold back to him, explaining that there were no merchants traveling the route. He mentioned this surprised him, and he asked the lady to repeat what she said. Behind him, two men laughed and teased him angrily. He demanded an explanation from the lady, questioning her about Sue and Hajar traveling with the Robart Guild Japhone Groot. To his surprise, the lady claimed to have never heard of the Robart Guild. The teasing men behind him mockingly asked if he had just woken up from his mother's lap and stated that going to Tartar through the pond and river was suicidal. They further mentioned the lawless harbor ruled by the Golden Lion, wondering who in their right mind would willingly go and die there. Confused about the situation, he turned back to the lady and inquired if it was true that there was no Robart Guild and that she hadn't heard of Sue and Hajar. She affirmed that the Pious to Merchant Association was the only one present, and they had no knowledge of any Robart Guild or Sue and Hajar. Leaving the building, he recollected that when he first met Soon, the latter was already the leader of the Robart Guild. At that time, he was 15 years old, and it was 3 years from now on. He wondered how the guild could have grown so rapidly and become widely known in just 3 years. Suddenly, he heard shouting from a nearby location and noticed a crowd of angry people berating someone for helping immigrants. He managed to slip through the crowd and witness the soldier kicking a man. To his shock, he recognized the man being kicked as Soon Hajar and wondered why he was a prisoner. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and like the video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time again. There's a line in a certain manga that goes, for humans, death is not attained due to the stoppage of their heart, but rather when people forget about them. However, for him, death wasn't being forgotten by others. It was actually the opposite. He used to live by selling in-game items and wished for others to forget about him. Having lived under the radar all that time, he wondered how he ended up there, suddenly facing off against those well-known top rankers in front of such a large crowd. Moreover, he pondered how he managed to compete with them on equal footing. But then, he remembered that the god within him awakened in the middle of a game after she was installed on his ID. Everything changed. Our story began on a stormy night outside a house. The owner, peering through her door, noticed someone attempting to forcefully enter. Eventually, the door collapsed, swinging open. Reacting quickly, she reached into her desk cabinet and grabbed what appeared to be a pair of earphones. As the intruder kicked his way into her home, Ikezaki Kokone swiftly inserted the earphone-like device into her ears, initiating the D-Mind system. The man lunged towards her, but she skillfully evaded his grasp, aided by the system's explanation that it was not a typical virtual reality experience. The man managed to pin her down, his grip tightening around her throat, intending to strangle her. In the midst of this life-or-death struggle, the system asked if she would like to continue using her service, to which she somehow managed to accept. As the man applied more pressure to her throat, hastening her demise, the system clarified that by agreeing to their service, her consciousness would be separated from her physical body, effectively causing her death in the real world. It asked if she comprehended and consented to this arrangement. With a grim acceptance, she replied affirmatively, urging the system to proceed since she would meet her end regardless. Choosing the final kingdom as her destination, she struggled to convey her preference. The system acknowledged her decision and commenced the transfer of her digitized consciousness. Tears streaming down her face, she closed her eyes and let go of her physical existence. While her body perished at the hands of her assailants, her consciousness survived within the game world she had created. The system informed her that Ikezaki Kokone's consciousness was now bound for the final kingdom after her death. The man positioned her in a chair, fastening a rope around her neck. A phone call interrupted him, inquiring about the situation. He assured the caller that everything had proceeded smoothly. Pleased with his accomplishment, the person on the other end promised to send him his payment and advised him to lay low abroad for a while. The following day, news outlets reported the discovery of Kokone's lifeless body in her home. At dawn, she was identified as the representative of FK Software Company known for developing the online game Final Kingdom. Notably, she was also credited with VRS, the virtual reality system that had captivated the world 5 years prior, and she had been actively involved in game-related events. The man, wearing a device that granted access to the final kingdom, found himself face to face with a dragon as it slowly gathered flames in its mouth. It exhaled a fiery blast, transforming into the final kingdom's logo. Opening his eyes slowly, he marveled at the dragon above him, exhilarated to have entered the neophyte's town and surrounded by diverse sights. Meanwhile, news outlets revealed that Ikezaki had announced the development of a game utilizing VRS to the public. Due to her influential presence, numerous players had eagerly anticipated its release. Additionally, a will had been discovered in her house, leading investigators to speculate that she had suffered physical and mental breakdowns, prompting her decision to end her own life. On the other hand, FK Software Company insisted that her death was not a suicide. However, the man switched off the television, unable to finish watching the news. He sighed in frustration, saddened that a talented individual like Kokone had met such a fate. Suddenly, he recalled Kokone's words about the VRS program directly impacting the user's brain. She had warned of the potential misuse of such technology if it were to become commercially available. The man, who happened to be the company's president, had confronted her, questioning the substantial investment he had made in the project and the notion of limiting the remarkable program's reach to the gaming industry alone. Kokone had argued that if the entire world became addicted to virtual reality, it would lead to severe problems as people progressively neglected reality. She staunchly refused to allow the program's uncontrolled distribution. The enraged president berated her, claiming she wanted to kill the goose that laid the golden axe. She countered by explaining that the gaming industry was a vast market, assuring him that the substantial funds he had invested would yield significant returns. Thus, he should not worry. Lost in thought, the president gazed out of the window, pondering the idea that using VR systems exclusively for gaming was foolish. He regretted how far he had gone, reflecting that if only Kokone had changed her perspective, things might not have escalated to this point. 7 years later, deep within the Final Kingdom's secret dungeon in the Frost region, a multitude of players faced a colossal monster, Iron Wolf. The guildmaster of Blade Guild reminded his comrades. Iron Wolf asked Joker about his extraordinary abilities and how he had managed to defeat the seemingly invincible monster. Joker simply replied with a mysterious smile, stating that he was just a player who had spent a lot of time studying the game's mechanics and discovering its secrets. Iron Wolf pressed further, expressing his admiration for Joker's skills and his desire to learn from him. Joker chuckled, amused by Iron Wolf's eagerness, and agreed to share some of his knowledge. As they walked through the virtual world of the Final Kingdom, Joker explained various strategies and techniques, revealing hidden shortcuts and powerful tactics. Iron Wolf listened intently, absorbing every word and marveling at Joker's expertise. With Joker's guidance, Iron Wolf's understanding of the game deepened, and his confidence grew. He began to see the world of the Final Kingdom in a new light, recognizing opportunities and challenges that he had never noticed before. As they parted ways, Joker left Iron Wolf with a parting gift, a rare item that would aid him on his journey. Iron Wolf thanked Joker gratefully, feeling inspired and determined to continue his adventures in the Final Kingdom. From that day forward, Iron Wolf embarked on a quest to hone his skills and become a legendary player like Joker. And though their paths diverged, the bond forged between them remained strong, a testament to the transformative power of friendship and mentorship in the world of virtual reality. NPC non-player character disguised as a player, known as the Wyvern Master, who controlled the wyvern they had just defeated. This revelation shocked Sonoda, who realized that they had been manipulated into attacking Hayato. Hayato then revealed that the footprints they found earlier were deliberately left by the Wyvern Master to mislead them. He also explained that the Badlander set they found belonged to the Wyvern Master, who used it to hide and manipulate the situation. As Sonoda and his associates grappled with this new information, Hayato demanded compensation for the trouble they had caused him. Sonoda reluctantly agreed, acknowledging Hayato's prowess in the game. With the situation resolved, Hayato and Shuma left the area. leaving Sonoda and his associates to contemplate their actions. As they departed, Hayato reflected on the events that had unfolded and the lessons he had learned about trust, deception, and the true nature of the final kingdom. With a renewed sense of determination, he vowed to continue his journey, knowing that he had the skills and knowledge to succeed in the virtual world. As he ventured forth into the unknown, Hayato knew that challenges awaited him, but he also knew that he had the strength and resilience to overcome them. With Kaori by his side and Shuma as his ally, he was ready to face whatever obstacles lay ahead and carve out his own path in the final kingdom. And as he looked to the future, Hayato felt a sense of excitement and anticipation, knowing that the greatest adventures were yet to come. Done, he carefully reviewed the documents she handed him, which outlined a detailed plan for financial success in the game. Intrigued but still hesitant, he asked Kaori about the risks involved. Kaori acknowledged that there were risks, but she assured him that with proper strategy and determination, the rewards far outweighed the potential downsides. After much deliberation, he made up his mind and decided to take the leap of faith. Kaori smiled, expressing her confidence in his decision, and they toasted to their partnership. With Kaori's guidance and support, he embarked on a new chapter in his journey within the final kingdom. He borrowed the necessary funds, purchased the hero set, and delved into higher-level dungeons with renewed vigor and determination. As he accumulated rare items and steadily increased his wealth, he marveled at the transformation he had undergone. No longer a struggling player on the fringes of the game, he was now a formidable force to be reckoned with, a true master of the final kingdom. Months passed, and his success continued to grow, thanks to his partnership with Kaori and his unwavering dedication to his goals. Together, they navigated the challenges of the game, overcoming obstacles and seizing opportunities with skill and determination. With each passing day, he grew more confident in his abilities and more grateful for the friendship and support of Kaori. She had been there for him when he needed it most, guiding him through the darkest moments and celebrating with him in times of triumph. As they forged ahead together, he knew that their partnership was not just about financial success. It was about friendship, trust, and mutual respect. And with Kaori by his side, he knew that anything was possible in the final kingdom. And so, their journey continued, filled with adventure, excitement, and endless possibilities. For him, the final kingdom was not just a game, it was a world of opportunity, where dreams could be realized and fortunes could be made. And with Kaori as his guide, he was ready to conquer whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in his ability to succeed and grateful for the chance to live his best life in the virtual realm. He was outside. He hailed a taxi and quickly made his way to the designated meeting place. As he arrived, he scanned the area cautiously, making sure he wasn't being followed. Spotting a familiar figure, he approached cautiously, ready for any confrontation. Sonoda and his associates were waiting for him, their expressions a mix of impatience and menace. Hayato tensed, preparing himself for the worst as he stepped forward to confront them. Sonoda wasted no time in getting to the point, demanding the return of the stolen items. Hayato remained calm, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. He couldn't afford to let Sonoda and his cronies get their hands on the items he had acquired. With a steely resolve, he refused to comply with Sonoda's demands, knowing that giving in would only embolden them further. Sensing the tension escalating, Hayato braced himself for a confrontation. But before things could escalate further, a sudden commotion erupted nearby, drawing everyone's attention. Hayato seized the opportunity, slipping away unnoticed in the chaos. As he made his escape, he felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. Despite narrowly evading capture, he knew that his troubles were far from over. With Sonoda and his associates hot on his trail, he would need to stay one step ahead if he hoped to survive. Determined to outwit his pursuers, Hayato vanished into the bustling city streets, disappearing into the anonymity of the crowd. With each step, he moved further away from danger, plotting his next move carefully as he navigated the perilous world of the final kingdom. He arrived at his new residence. The men informed him that the installation of his new VR system was complete. Grateful for their efforts, he thanked them, aware of the fees for the new VR system and the payment to Shuma had taken on his finances. Additionally, the last Badlander set he had acquired didn't boast impressive stats, making it difficult to sell. Nevertheless, he found solace in knowing that after selling everything and settling his debts, he would still have 300,000 credits. Without hesitation, he entered his new VR system, eager to verify if the previous incident had truly been his fault. Venturing into the El Dorado areas, a class dungeon known as the Forgotten Dragon Nest, he concealed himself behind massive stones, speculating whether anyone else was present. Contemplating the possibility of someone employing a stealth spell, he activated his concealment detection, revealing that there was indeed no one else nearby. Emerging from his hiding spot, he proceeded toward the center of the dungeon. Standing in the middle, he hesitated before taking a step forward. He was certain that this was the area where he had accessed the secret quest, but he wondered how he had accomplished it, and where he had seen the girl trapped inside the crystal. Curiosity piqued, the girl asked him what he was contemplating. He replied, expressing his attempt to recall where he had last encountered the girl trapped inside the crystal. The girl asked him to confirm if he recognized her, to which he replied affirmatively, albeit unable to recollect the details. Turning around to address his unseen interlocutor, he was shocked to find the girl standing right behind him. Overwhelmed, he collapsed to the ground, his gaze fixed on her as she descended and looked at him. Discovering that she was no ghost, he knelt down beside him, observing her. The girl, knowledgeable about the game and him, someone who had previously been insignificant, marked their first encounter. She asked him where he had found her, but he was lost in his thoughts, wondering if the girl in front of him was an NPC. Then he realized something strange. If the girl was an NPC, a green frame would appear to distinguish her from real players. So he wondered if she wasn't an NPC after all. The girl smiled and asked him if he was thinking about her being an NPC. Suddenly, she turned into a green fog and entered his body, leaving him surprised. He shouted in shock, and when the fog disappeared, he touched his body in confusion. The girl asked him if he still thought she was an NPC, making him look around in panic. Then he stopped, realizing something, and touched his glowing body, asking if it was her who had entered inside him. His hand lit up as the girl confirmed that he was right. He was shocked to see the girl sitting on his hand laughing. She told him that she would explain everything if he told her where he had seen her before. Later, in the rugged landscape, he asked her if she was saying that she had lost her memories. She replied yes and told him that she didn't remember anything about herself or how she ended up in the crystal. She asked him to tell her who she was. He asked her how many times he needed to repeat that he didn't know her, but she reminded him that he had said the same thing before. He opened the system, explaining to the girl that he only had a faint feeling that he had seen her somewhere. Other than that, he didn't know anything about her. As he looked at the system, he realized something was strange. He remembered activating the secret quest of the girl who lost her memories, but it had disappeared. He knew that the girl who lost her memories was currently beside him, so he wondered if it disappeared because of an NPC and why the quest had vanished. She asked him to confirm if they had indeed met somewhere before. He replied that since she was an NPC, she might have been modeled after some celebrity by the development team. This could explain why he thought he knew her. The girl hit him on the back of his head, furiously explaining that she had already told him she was not an NPC. He scratched his head in shock and asked her how she could hit him. She replied, of course, and told him that she wasn't a ghost. He threw an apple at her, but it simply passed through her and landed on the ground. He asked her why he was able to do that if she wasn't a ghost. She replied that it was because only he could touch her, making him wonder why. She sadly explained that he was the one who had awakened her, and no one else could see her or touch her except him. Hearing this, his cheeks turned red as he wondered if it meant she wouldn't let anyone touch her except him. He found it somewhat titillating. He told her that being an NPC must be tough, which made the girl furious. She shouted at him again, emphasizing that she was not an NPC. He asked her if she was a player, and she replied negatively. Meanwhile, at the top of the cliff, Kaori and a man were observing him. The man asked Kaori if he was the guy who ran off with President Mizuki's money. Kaori confirmed and expressed disbelief that Sonoda had lost 40 million alone. The man smiled and commented that hey. Yen. He demanded an explanation, and Kaori trembled as she tried to justify the failure, expressing her shock at Hayato's unexpected skills. The man's grip tightened as he reminded her of the consequences of failure, threatening her life if she didn't rectify the situation immediately. Kaori pleaded for another chance, promising to make things right. The man released her, warning her that failure wasn't an option this time. Back in the virtual world, Hayato logged out, leaving the girl alone. She called him an idiot and sadly admitted that she couldn't speak to anyone else but him. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the man was livid, confirming if the assassination had really failed. Sonoda grabbed Kaori's neck and asked her if she remembered how much she had lost, reminding her that it was about 40 million yen. He demanded an explanation, and Kaori trembled as she tried to justify the failure, expressing her shock at Hayato's unexpected skills. The man's grip tightened as he reminded her of the consequences of failure, threatening her life if she didn't rectify the situation immediately. Kaori pleaded for another chance, promising to make things right. The man released her, warning her that failure wasn't an option this time. In the tense aftermath of the failed assassination attempt, Sonoda's fury erupted like a volcano. He lashed out at Kaori, blaming her for the failure, his anger boiling over as he raised his hand to strike her. But before he could deliver the blow, a commanding voice cut through the tension, bringing a temporary calm to the room. The man at the center of the room intervened, quelling the rising storm of emotions. He reminded Sonoda that losing control wouldn't solve their problems and instructed him to release Kaori. Reluctantly, Sonoda obeyed, but not without a final warning to Kaori. As the situation settled, the man turned his attention to Kaori, questioning her about Hayato's victory over Yuzumi Shenjin. Intrigued by the unexpected turn of events, he saw potential in Hayato's unorthodox triumph. He pondered Hayato's role as a possible asset for their future plans. Meanwhile, Hayato found himself grappling with a different kind of conflict. After impulsively repaying a large sum of money, he reflected on his impulsive decision and its consequences. Despite his temporary relief at settling his debt, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease about his precarious financial situation. Contemplating his next move, Hayato realized the importance of being cautious in a world where debts and obligations loomed over him like dark clouds. As he navigated the complexities of his virtual and real-life struggles, he couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious girl who had entered his life. In another corner of the virtual world, the girl eagerly awaited Hayato's return, her anticipation palpable as she yearned for their next encounter. When Hayato finally arrived, their reunion was filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension, each harboring their own hopes and fears for the future. Propelled by her unwavering belief in their shared destiny, the girl presented Hayato with a daring proposition to conquer the infamous cursed sanctuary. Despite Hayato's initial skepticism, the girl's conviction and persuasive arguments slowly began to sway him. As they delved deeper into their discussion, Hayato grappled with conflicting emotions, torn between skepticism and a glimmer of hope. With the promise of riches and adventure beckoning, he hesitated on the precipice of a life-changing decision. Ultimately, Hayato's journey into the cursed depths of the sanctuary symbolized more than just a quest for treasure. It represented a leap of faith into the unknown, a gamble on the possibility of a brighter future amidst the shadows of uncertainty. And so, with the echoes of their shared dreams and aspirations reverberating in the air, Hayato and the girl embarked on their next adventure, ready to confront whatever challenges fate had in store for them.